Oh yeah, I'm sure this is going to be a great idea that won't it all end badly for me.
Tobiano paint horse, equus ferris cabalus, perisodactyla, get that mammalian feeling. Horses. Because it's been a long day in the field. You're tired, you're hungry, and nothing beats coming home to a crock pot filled with a hot serving of 6:30 p.m. It's a reminder of a time when pissing contests didn't involve Sheetz parking lots on a Saturday morning. Look at you with your Ford Super Duty and a keep honking I'm reloading bumper sticker. Oh nice, you put whistle tips on your 3 Series sedan. I've always wondered what it would sound like if ambulances were 70% less urgent. Stick-on vents! How cool, man! I've literally never encountered... No. I totally believe you've seen the floating DVD logo actually hit the corner of the screen before. Come on, a guy with a misspelled August Burns Ed tattoo wouldn't actually lie. I'm just curious why your girlfriend is making a duck face in her mugshot, and why that's the lock screen you went with for your cracked HTC Thunderbolt. But hey, don't let me distract you from whatever's going on between you and that Drew Barrymore issue of Playboy from the early 90s. I mean, you gotta keep yourself busy while your girlfriend's in the clink, right? Oh yeah, horses. So Belle is a 27-year-old American paint horse, which is essentially a cross-section of the traditional Western stock horse and a pinto. Not the explodey Ford one, but the actual horse. In particular, Belle is a Tobiano paint horse, with her characteristically white legs and similarly white markings across her back and near the rear in stripe-like patterns. Wait, did I say stripe? I meant strip. But either way, it's just patterns of white, here and there. She's a real beauty up close, but then I love the look of a paint horse, so I suppose I'm a little bit biased. But let's get on to what you really want to know about. Horsepower. So how much horsepower does a horse actually produce? Well, you'd be surprised to learn that an average horse actually gets over 257, just kidding, it's 1. But not at peak output. Let me explain. When Scottish engineer James Watt developed the concept of horsepower, its definition concerned the continuous power output of a single healthy draft horse. His process involved measuring the amount of water that the horse, while walking at a normal pace, could raise in a minute. This number came out to roughly 33,000 foot-pounds per minute, or 550 foot-pounds per second. That is 1 horsepower. But at sprint, a horse can produce a peak power output of between 15 and 20 horsepower. However, there's naturally an endurance component to this number, since a horse obviously can't keep that sprint going for as long as a car, whether its father was Secretariat, Seabiscuit, or Butterscotch Horseman. Oh hey, I made a reference everyone knew I was probably gonna make. Yeah, great. And as a completely inexperienced rider who'd only ever been on a horse twice in his entire life, I wasn't trying to go fast. I'll be straight up with you. Yeah, some of the shots are me, but a lot of these shots are my friend to whom the horse actually belongs, because she actually knows what she's doing up there. And I'll be frank, I was in Richmond only for the weekend, and we only had but so many hours of daylight, so we didn't really have time to go over anything but the basics. Mounting up, keeping tension on the reins, sitting straight but relaxed, understanding that you're constantly going to be rebalancing and readjusting, and just sort of accepting that without panicking, and realizing that you're going to be engaging muscles that you probably haven't used in ages. Riding a horse is going to feel like a workout once you're done. But a good workout. Of course, that's in the best of scenarios, because you also have to consider the overall temperament of a horse. This isn't to say that cars don't have a temperament unto themselves, but strictly speaking, your car isn't alive in the biological sense. It took a while in the pen to get Belle warmed up and ready to go. She's a beautiful horse and exceptionally well maintained because, well, she's loved. I've known Belle for years before this review, so while I'd never saddled up with her before, I wasn't exactly an unfamiliar presence to her. I've helped feed her and brush her, and we've built a bit of a rapport. A small one, yes, but for as mercurial as horses can be, I feel like we get along well. So this entire experience didn't turn into as big a disaster as it could have. When it was all said and done, I really felt luckier than a pardoned turkey. But seriously, it was a fun experience, and there's not much more that I can say about it than that. Realistically, there are any number of channels who could give you a more in-depth look into what actually riding a horse is like, which I suppose begs the question then, why the hell would you review a horse on a car channel? Now, never minding that this is also a channel that's done lawnmowers and sheep before, let's just back it up and say that this is where I get to go all Roman and talk about history. Yeah, you're on holiday break, but I don't care, we're opening up our textbooks. You see, not unlike cash for clunkers and the decline of the used car market, the devaluation of the horse as the de facto mode of transportation parallels the rise of the automobile, even if the transition to cars from horses wasn't as immediate as one might expect. Horses used to be status symbols, like certain cars are today. The wealthy had the prize-winning breeds that they either used as broodmares or as transportation to their fancy galas, where they poured pudding on each other and made love in giant tubs of talcum powder or whatever it is that rich people did back then. Meanwhile, poor people generally just used an ox if they had to take a long trip to the middle of gorgeous goddamn nowhere. But then the Industrial Revolution came along, and you almost had to have a horse if you wanted to get anything done. Cities and their surrounding regions began to change shape to accommodate the proliferation of the horse. They weren't just used to plow fields, they were used to pull wagons, trolleys, and carriages, transport goods and people across deep valleys and perilous mountain ranges where no locomotive could reach. They became useful appliances, but also a part of the family. The bond between a man and his horse isn't a myth. For a lot of people, the horse was their meal ticket, the difference between a life of poverty and a life of plenty, and the ever-shifting middle ground of barely getting by. As the late 19th and early 20th centuries rolled around, there was one working horse for every 3 people in the United States, and the number of horse cab rides per year for an average city-dwelling citizen numbered into the hundreds, to the point that you were just as likely, if not far more likely, to run into a horse in the city than out on the plains. Now, that doesn't mean Red Dead Redemption is a lie, it just means that my distant ancestor, Amos Butler, of the dreaded Butler Boy Bandits, is being a little overdramatic in his journal entries. The heathen revelry of the Dooley gang persists. They have slaughtered my beloved Jezebel, the chestnut-brown beauty who came to me in the wilds of Amberino, taken from me by a bullet forged in a city that knows little and less of these resplendent beasts. I looked into her eyes as the light fled, and I fear as if they held some terrible secret I am not to know. I am told to keep the faith, but faith is the province of the righteous, not the soiled men and fallen women in this band of dying, shiftless brigands. We are of the dirt. We are of the untilled soil. We look out for them as matters to us, for it is clear to me that the age of the iron horse is nigh, and they gather in the mouth of valleys where God casts no shadow. You see, for as resplendent as these horses were, and for all the uses they had, your average workhorse was responsible for anywhere between 20 to 50 pounds of manure and a gallon of white-hot piss every single day. Take hundreds of horses per square mile into account, and the rising clog of dead horse carcasses in the cities, and the flies and rodents that attracted, and all the disease that they carried, and, well, after a while, horses became a bit of a necessary menace, sort of like failure. But they still provided a valuable social service in that it kept the working class in direct contact with the wealthy, so that even while the divisions grew between them, it wasn't as though the classes didn't still have to interact with one another on a daily basis. Horses linked everybody. Wealthy to itinerant, itinerant to one another, whether it was through the distribution of goods, transportation, or even the mail. But then we started to get balls deep into fossil fuels, using steam engines, coal-fired electricity, and the combustion engine. Which is fine, outside of the whole pollution thing. You know, it's just a different kind of pollution, but city streets were a little cleaner, with fewer piles of horse shit and slick streams of urine. But now, suddenly the means of conveyance were controlled by big oil and major auto manufacturers, so that we now needed government action to create roadways for the expansion and growth of the automotive industry. And I suppose it's just the long arm of manifest destiny putting on a different tattoo sleeve. I guess I'm just saying that we lost something by losing horses. Now, granted, they're not gone, and cars have made life a lot easier, even if it hasn't made things easier on the environment, but then again, I'm not here to stand on a soapbox and talk about carbon footprints. The change from horses to cars reshaped America. The Census Bureau even declared that the move from horses to cars and the resulting elimination of horse industry jobs, coupled with the plummeting price of grain, was one of the major causes of the Great Depression. And while we did recover, it was a long, hard road back. With that said, today, the horse industry accounts for roughly 4.6 million working Americans, generating $39 billion per year for the economy. So it's not as though horse industry jobs only exist as campaign promises. But then, it's crazy to think there was ever a time where you had little choice but to go ages without talking to a person because distance was this insurmountable obstacle unless you had a horse to carry you or your letters. It's something we take for granted today, and yes, okay, I'm on my soapbox, my old man soapbox, and I guess, how old are you really when you're 33, but just bear with me. Because I do think it's something we do take for granted. The ease with which we're able to communicate these days makes it so that we take that ability to communicate for granted so that maybe when a friend texts us, we forget to ever text them back. We might mean to get back to them, but it's simply not a priority in this moment, in the chaos and sensory overload of life, and its precarious balance between privation and prosperity. And we drift further apart from the people we care about without really meaning to, all because it's easier to get in touch, but harder to keep up. Horses were society's tether. Then again, considering this horse is a link I share to one of my closest friends in this world, I suppose they still are. Happy holidays, everyone.
Tell you're not dignified.
So thank you for this year and watching our stuff on YouTube. I hope your day is filled with all of the brown and all of the brand and all of the regular